In Lua we have two types of for loops, numeric for loops and also generic for loops. Now I'm just going to cover the numeric for loops. So the syntax for that is the keyword for, then a starting value and the ending value, and separated by the comma or a comma, and then a do, which is a keyword, the for loop's body, and the end keyword. So everything which is between the do and the end is the for loop's body. So now let's run it, and as you can see, it starts at 1 and it ends at 5, so 5 inclusive. So it prints out 1 through 5, the numbers. You can also add a third parameter for this for, which is the step size. So let's say I want to increase it by 2 and run it. So now it starts at 1, then increased by 2 it goes to 3, and then it goes to 5. And now let's take a look how to decrease values. So here in the second for loop I'm starting with the value of 5 and the end value is 1, and I'm increasing it with -1. So it counts down from 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1. You can also, in numeric for loops, you can also make the step size a float number, so it will start at 1, goes up to 5 with the value of 1.1. So if I run it, it is 1, the next iteration it is 2.1, the next iteration it is 3.2, and the last iteration is 4.3. And of course the next iteration would be 5.4, so it is already bigger than 5, so it ends at 4.3. Now let's take a look at the while loops in Lua. So it starts with the keyword while and an expression, so just give it true. And do just print out something like hello and end. So you give a keyword while, then an expression which needs to be evaluated to true to actually run the body of the while loop, and the body is defined between the do and the end keyword. So everything which is between the do and the end will be executed. So and now we are going to have an infinite loop. It just prints infinitely the word hello, and we can stop it by pressing the stop button. So now make a new while loop which makes more sense than the previous one. So I'm going to create a variable called counter, and it will start at 0, and while counter is less than 5, so this is the logical operation, is less than 5, then do and print out the counter's value, and until now it's still just an infinite loop because counter is always 0 and 0 is always less than 5, so we need to increase counter's value, and we can do this with counter equals counter plus 1. And now let's print it. So it counts from 0 up to 4, and 5 not included because 5 is not less than 5. And in other languages you can you can create a shortcut for this expression. So you can make counter plus equals 1, or in C or Java you can also make counter plus plus. But these two are not valid syntax in Lua. So if you want to increase a variable's value, you need to do this way. So I'm going to delete this too. The repeat until loop in Lua is like the do-while loops in Java or C++. So, and the syntax for that is the keyword repeat. Then what we should repeat, so let's print just out hello, and the until keyword, so not n but until, and some kind of expression here. So I'm going to create here a counter variable, so counter equals 0. I'm going to increase counter's value, so counter equals counter plus 1. So repeat until counter is equals to 5. And now let's run it. And as you can see, it prints out hello 5 times. Or you can also add here until counter is bigger than 5. And it prints out hello 6 times. So here is the repeats body. This will be executed until this expression evaluates to false. So we can just try it out this way. So I'm going to delete this and just give it false. And we will have now an infinite loop, because this until is always false. So just stop it, and if I give it just true, it will execute it only once. Hello. So it's as in the do while loop, it executes at least once, and then it checks for the expression. So if this expression is true, it quits the repeat loop, and if it's false, it will continue until it gets true. And now let's take a look at the conditionals, or the if, elseif and else statements in Lua. So I already created two variables, var1 and var2, and I'm going to change var1 to 5. So I'm going to ask here if var1 is less than var2, then print out the word less. Else if var1 is bigger than var2, then print out it's bigger or greater than, and also let's give it an else. So what should happen if these two does not evaluate to true? So it means it is equal. And now let's run it. Yes, and before I forget, we also need to have here an end. So you always give the end keyword to your functions, to your ifs, to your loops. And now let's run it. and it prints out less because of course var1, which is 5, is less than var2, which is 10. Now let's make var1 55, and it prints out bigger because var1 is 55, which is bigger than var2, which is 10. And now let's make var1 actual 10, and this will evaluate to false because 10 is not less than 10. This will also evaluate to false because 10 is not bigger than 10, so it will print out, which is in the else block. So equal. We have also the so-called logical operators and or not. So here in this if block I'm going to add a logical operator and var1 is equals to, let's say, 6, and let's change var1 to 6. So if var1 is less than var2, which is true, and var1 is also equals to 6, so it will print out less or 6. Less or 6. If you are using AND, it means both of these needs to evaluate to true, both of these expressions. If you are using OR, then only one of these expressions needs to evaluate to true. So var1 is less than var2, it's true. And now let's change this to, let's say, 8. So this will be evaluated to false. But it still prints less or 6. And we have also the not operator, so not false, let's say, and if I run it, it still prints less or 6 because not false evaluates to true. And if I give it true and I'm change this to AND, now this will evaluate to true, but this will evaluate to false. So the next statement will be run, which is this else block, because var1 is still not bigger than var2. In Lua, you have the so-called global scope, and also you can create a local scope. So if you want to print out the global, you can do this with the print and underscore G. And if I run it, as you can see, it prints out that underscore G is a table. And if you want to take a look what is inside of this underscore G, you can do this with the so-called generic for loop or using the pairs iterator. So I'm going to create the generic for loop, so key and value in pairs of underscore G do, and you don't need to go in the next line, you can just do everything in one line. So just print out the key and the value, and of course we need to end it with the keyword AND. And now if I run it, as you can see, it prints out everything which is inside this underscore G table. So we have the coroutine, which is a table, an assert, which is a function, a toString, which is also a function, toNumber, which is also a function. We have IO, which is a table, and also raw get function, arg table, ipairs, print, pcall, gc info module. These are all functions in the global namespace. Here also underscore version, it prints out Lua that we are using, the Lua 5.1 version. And yes, also the type function. And let's create here a global variable. I'm just going to name it, let's say my underscore var equal to, let's give it my name, so Attila. And if I run it, you can see that my var will be inside this underscore g global table. So where it is? Here it is. So now my var with the value of Attila is the part of this global table. And you can also create local variables. So let me just create one. And local variables are useful when you want to define variables inside functions, inside if conditionals or statements, inside for loops. So just create, let's say, an if statement. So if 5 is less than 10, which is of course true, then let's create a local variable. So local var1 will be equal to 20 and end it. So now this local variable is only visible within this if statement. So if I want to print out var1, I will get nil. But if I remove the local keyword from here, this var1 will be created in the global scope. So if I run it, now it prints 20. So in other languages, when you create a variable inside of if or a for loop or a function, it will be local to that function. But in Lua, if you are creating variables without the local keyword in front of the variable, it will be automatically a global variable. In Lua, functions are the so-called first-class functions, which means you can assign functions to variables, and you can also give functions as parameters to other functions. So now let's just define some function. So the keyword function, the function's name or signature, and the parameters, so a and b, and it should return a plus b, and also don't forget the and keyword. And now everything which is between this function name and the and keyword is the function's body. Now let's create another function, and this will be the subtract, and the sub is colored, so maybe it is a reserved keyword, so I'm going to name it sub t for subtract. So a and b, and return a minus b and end it. And now let's call these two functions. So print add, let's say 8 and 3, and print sub t with, I don't know, 10 and 7. And now let's run them. So 8 plus 3 is 11, and 10 minus 7 is 3. The other way to define the function is assign it to a variable. So I'm going to create a multiplication or mul, and this will be a function, and it will also take two arguments, a and b, and you can define on one line, so you don't need to go to the second line like in these cases. So, and this should return a times b and also AND it. And I'm going to create a divide function, or division. It also takes two numbers, so a and b, and it should return, not repeat, but return a divided by b and AND it. Now let's call these two functions and print out their values. So I'm going to call the mul, or the multiplication of, let's say, 10 and 8. And then I'm going to call the divide function, and let's say 7 and 4. Now let's run them. And here it prints 10 times 8 is 80, and 7 divided by 4 is 1.75. So it's up to you how you would like to create your functions. I like both ways. As I said, you can give functions as parameters to another functions. So I'm just going to create a function, and I'm going to name it color, and the color will take a function as its first argument, and let's say a value as its second argument, and it will call the function with the value, and I'm also going to AND it. So this is the color function, which will call this function, and now I'm going to create a second function, which will be the callable function, and I'm going to just name it print name. And print name takes one argument, which is name, and it will print out the name. And I'm also going to AND it. And now let's invoke or call the color, and as a first argument give it the print name function, print name, and the value will be, let's say, Jack. And it prints out Jack. So now the color calls the print name function, which prints out the name of Jack.